And then we went over a little bit of exponents, and I know we went over a little bit of negative exponents, which was, if you remember, changing it to the 1 divided by, so if changing it to a fraction. We talked about reciprocals a little bit, then removing parentheses and multiplying negatives, a little bit of factoring, and then we skipped over logarithms to come to polynomials. And we just did adding, subtracting, multiplying. I'm not sure if we even did dividing polynomials. And now we're talking about linear equations. And then what we're moving towards is functions or quadratic equations. And then functions again. So all of this is kind of at the bottom of the algebra index. But what's off to the side is algebra 2, and then a pre-algebra. So what I would like to do is some of the things that are on algebra 2 after we get through, you know, graphing and a little bit of functions, and even like a little something maybe from trigonometry and calculus, only because this will help you if you get 1 or 2 of the questions that are more advanced, you won't have to skip it. So this is the goal, because we've been together and right now we don't have a new class coming in for at least like a week or so. We can do something that's more advanced instead of how normally we have to start over with a section. So where we are right now, I'm gonna put this link up in Google Classroom, but we're just gonna go over what the quadrants are. So I know that we did talk about this because we were drawing and just having the idea of the quadrants, but for our textbook, they call it the coordinate plane. In Math is Fun, they're calling it Cartesian coordinates. So it's the same thing. I'm pretty sure, like we always say, this one is the international website. So sometimes the language is different. I believe that it's just gonna say coordinates, or you're just gonna see the picture of the plane. So what you need to remember is that 1 point is a combination of numbers, kind of like when you're playing bingo, or I think we talked about Who Sank My Battleship. I don't know if anyone plays board games. Maybe you've had a resurgence. Maybe you like board games again now that you've been home. I don't know. But what you have to remember is that the point is telling you how far along and how far up. So when you do this point, like this one is saying 12,5, it's always the X line first. So it's always an X, comma, a Y. This point means to go over 12 and then up 5. And that's how you're gonna find the point. So what I say to myself is that I always go in alphabetical order, X, Y, and then if you're doing 3-dimensional, which sometimes Math is Fun does, it's gonna say X, Y, Z. Typically in the high school test, it's just an X and a Y. So this is the introduction that's telling you how to find 1 point on the plane. Now this is telling you X is the horizon. And another way that I think of this, they're telling you it's horizontal. I'm imagining this as the horizon with a nice sunset, you know, maybe a palm tree and a hammock, you know, something. But whatever you have to do to remember, you only have to remember 1. So I always say X is first. I'm going in alphabetical order. I always say X is the horizon, and by default, the other one is going to be the vertical or the up and down. So if I'm saying I'm starting with X, I know I'm looking left to right, or I'm thinking about really walking, you know, like where the street would be flat, right? The vertical is more like the elevator idea of going up and down. So coming down a little bit more, they're just reminding you again with a new point. 6,4 is 6 across and up 4. And a lot of times you see these kind of graphs. I think we talked about it because you definitely see this in social studies, in some economic charts. You may see it in science or even reading, depending on what they're talking about. A lot of times you see this one quadrant where you're looking at positive numbers to the left and positive numbers going up. Once you add all of the quadrants, or basically just extend the line, you're gonna get the 4 quadrants, which is what we're holding in our imagination. So there are some links that I just want you to try out because today's just the intro. This one that is interactive, you get to just move the points and see what the coordinate pair is going to be. So if I move it to this, it's saying 1,5, and of course they're even doing the decimals, right? But you can move it anywhere and see what the coordinates would be. So you can click on that for a couple seconds if you want to. If you remember, then you don't have to do it. What the 4 quadrants are 2 whole number lines coming together. So now you can see that in red is the negative number. So I have the 2 number lines here, which is just, we talked a little bit about absolute value and how far something is away from 0. So when you see the arrows, if you remember from what we were just doing in geometry, that means the lines go on infinitely. So when we make the lines with points and we stop, that's when we start making the shapes. Like we said, once you get to 3 lines, you can now have the triangle. If you just put the 2 lines together like this at 0, you're gonna go on indefinitely. So this is for you, again, in your imagination, because you may just see the coordinate pair, you might not actually see the quadrant, the coordinate plane altogether. If they just tell you the number, you still have to imagine where it would be. So once you put the 2 number lines together, you have the 4 quadrants. And that's really what we're remembering today. Writing the pair, they're telling you always horizon is first, like we said, X, and then Y is the vertical distance. So 3, 2 means 3 to the right and 2 up. And this is what you want to have in your mind, in your imagination, in case you just see a pair and you don't see the coordinate plane. The origin is 0, 0. And this is just, again, kind of like a Pythagorean theorem. They're naming the Cartesian plane because they're naming it after Rene Descartes. So that's just the label that they're giving it on Math is Fun. So now this is where we're getting into being able to label everything on the plane. And they're using 6, 4, the same coordinate pair that they just used, but now they're using it with a negative value also. So we'll review the negative numbers again, doing slope, in case you forgot that. But this is saying 6, 4 is where they said it would be in this first quadrant. 6, -4 is now going to be at the bottom because it's now going negative on the Y line. -6, -4 is going to be over here in the third quadrant because it's going to go to the left being negative and it's going to go down. And then -6, +4 is going to be here. So still to the left, but higher, right? So this is also where it overlaps geometry a little bit because you can make shapes on the coordinate plane. So if they asked you, what shape are you to make out of -6, 4, 6, 4, -6, -4, 6, -4, you're recognizing that you're the same distance away from 0 at every single point. So that means you're going to make a rectangle, right? They could give you 3 points and then you would make maybe like a right triangle or something like that. So we're going to overlap a little bit of that so that for people who do remember this, you still have something new that you're trying. And we want to also remember one of the basic things that you could get if it was like a freshman level question is just where are the 4 quadrants? So I kind of said it when we were looking at the -6, 4, 6, 4. But what you want to remember is number 1 is where everything is positive. And that could be where you also see something in social studies or something in science or reading, where you are starting at 0 and you're going positive to the right, starting at 0 and going positive going up. But the quadrants go in a reverse order or counterclockwise. So number 2 would not be right here, where sometimes people think it would be because naturally most of the time we go clockwise. Number 2 is going to be to the left. Number 3 is going to be to the left and the bottom. And number 4 is going to be right under number 1. So you're remembering that you're going counterclockwise. Sometimes you might just get a question that says, where is -6, -4? And they're not going to show you the quadrants, of course. So you have to know going negative and negative, that would be quadrant 3. So you're holding this picture in your imagination of 1, 2, 3, 4 going counterclockwise. And this is a little chart of that. So what they're saying is, if you're in quadrant 1, you have a positive number and a positive number. If you're in quadrant 2, you have a negative number and a positive number. If you're in quadrant 3, you have a negative and a negative. And then if you're in quadrant 4, you had to go positive and then negative. Any questions about that so far?
No.
Okay. So now they're talking about multiple dimensions, which is what we also talked about when we were doing geometry. So one dimension is the number line. You're going left to right. 2 dimensions is left and right and up and down. And then the 3 dimensions is like a shape fully, that's a solid, right? That we're imagining it on a plane. And a coordinate plane that you can think about, which I think we talked about, is just like longitude and latitude lines. So sometimes when you're looking at a map and they have those lines, let me see.
No.
So if you look at like the Earth here and you see that, you know, wherever we are going to be is also a combination of coordinates. So sometimes they say that in movies, like, give me your coordinates. And they might be talking about flight or being in a submarine or being on land. If it's maybe like the military, you're still thinking of where are you in latitude and where are you in longitude, right? So this is, we know that the Earth is a solid, and that where we are is an actual place that's also like a solid, right? So there might be mountains, trees, houses, something that's still 3-dimensional, but you're giving coordinates for it. This same thing is happening on the coordinate plane, where you could say here's a rectangular prism, or here's a triangular prism, or something is on the plane, and then what would be each one of the points that make up that shape. So I believe that when we did this, the 3-dimensional was the most challenging because it's a challenge to imagine something 3-dimensional from a drawing. So I think that when we talked about this, I said, you're probably not going to get this on your high school test. So if you get one of these wrong, it's no problem because it's a challenge to really see the space as they're talking about it. And they're trying to use different colors and make it look 3-dimensional, but it's not a hologram, right? So if you get one in the 3-dimensional section, that's a challenge. Just read over what it says for Math is Fun and try to see what they're saying. Because when you're looking at this picture, you have to try to think about where is this rectangular prism really? So they're saying this is 0, 0, 0, which is now where all 3 lines would cross. But you have to imagine this Z line as coming like in and out towards you, and then straight back away from you. So you have the left and the right, you have the up and the down, but now this last one, you have to imagine it that this is coming in and out. So if you put this solid here, they're giving the coordinates of just this point as 2, 4, 5 for a X, a Y, and a Z. And that's sometimes a challenge because you're imagining this whole side. So if you remember when we were doing surface area, you're just imagining this one square. Where would this one point be? And that takes a little bit of imagination because you're looking at a 3D plane and a 3-dimensional shape, but you're really only talking about one point. So I'm going to say that for the review, we're just going to try it out, right? If you're looking for, 70, 80, 90, 100%. To make sure that you really get it. So when you text me or put your screenshot on Google Classroom, I'm gonna see how many people really remember. The other things that are on here under the here's more though, are just practicing the coordinates. So I think we did this one. We just clicked the interactive coordinates, but the hidden coordinate game, I'll list it. And if you want to do this, you can. So this is just saying that you're looking for your score to be as high as it can be. On the beginner, you only have the one quadrant again. When you click to easy or medium, it's going to go a little bit faster. When you go to quadrant 2, you can just practice that one for negative, positive. Or you can do all 4 quadrants, which is going to be the most challenging, that they're going to give you different targets in all 4 quadrants. So you have to mark with this yellow arrow whatever the target is. So if they say negative 27, positive 12, you're remembering that 27 is to the left and positive is, you know, up. And then you'll go to the next one. So the closer you are on the target, the higher your score. If you go over here, right, you're not going to get anything added to your score. So you can still say the same thing. Let me just do this for 3 minutes and see how good I am at knowing where the quadrant, the point should be. If you feel like you already know how to label everything, then you're just going straight to the questions. And clicking on question number 1, it says, excuse me, what are the coordinates of point A? So this is a kind of question that you definitely can get. And you're going to see an example, excuse me, of what they could show you in multiple choice. So what we're saying is, you see it's a 4 and a 2, but what they're going to test you on is which one should go first. So as a practice, I would say force yourself to do the X line, the horizon line first. Because if you remember, and this could be maybe like from orientation, if you can remember that far back, everyone's different. So there are people who, especially looking at something like this, you might want to look at red first. You might want to look at blue first. You might want to look from top to bottom first. Some people are going to read from left to right first. Other people are going to go from right to left, right? Because it depends on what you're visually drawn to. Some people are going to go straight to the fact that A is labeled. And this is kind of like a right to left reading. Some people are always going to read left to right, like we read in English. And then other people are going to be attracted to color or just go top down. We all do that in different ways. It's like looking at the newspaper or reading a magazine. Sometimes people read from, they flip to the back. Check out the horoscopes first or something, right? So what you want to do is give yourself a system so that you do it the same way all the time. You don't want it to be random, and you're doing this for strategy. So the only thing that's going to change, as you can see, it's going from 2, 4, 4, 2, negative 4, 2, 4, negative 2. So you should be able to say to yourself, when we're working on predicting again, that it's not negative. So that eliminates C and D, right? If you're doing a strategy. But if you know exactly where it is, you're saying it's over 4 and up 2. So what is that going to look like? X is going to be first and Y is going to be second, right? So it starts out with just going over the coordinates, and then it's going to give you a couple of those 3D shapes. Now, this is an example of one that we said you don't have the picture for. Now, if you do this, you can draw it on your scrap paper, or you can aim to hold the picture in your visual memory and say, where would a positive and then a negative be? And there's a couple like that, another 3D picture. And now this one is talking about, what shape is this? Is it a square, a kite, a rhombus, or a rectangle? We didn't really talk about a rhombus a lot, but I might have skipped that one. Here is a rhombus. So a flat shape with 4 equal straight sides, kind of looks like a diamond. And we didn't go over kite. A kite is also kind of like a diamond, except that there's a shorter part typically. They're not all equal sides. So it still has 4 straight sides, but 2 pair are equal to each other. So most people do know those 2 shapes, like a diamond and a kite, the difference between those 2. But again, you can take a look at those just for some extra shapes that we skipped over in geometry. But what you want to say is, if you draw out the plane or you see a pattern in the numbers, what would that be? And they're saying that you can open up a page and plot those points that they gave you, which was in the interactive coordinates that we just looked at. So if you plot the points, what shape are you going to end up getting? And another one like that. And what are the coordinates again? And that's it. Back to 3D. So this is an overview of the plane. Once we do this overview, we're going to start talking about slope. So any questions so far about the overview?
No.